Hi, everybody in podcast land and also on YouTube. I'm James.
I'm David.
I'm Riley.
And this is the Carpool Critics Movie Podcast, where today we are covering the new David Fincher movie, Mank.
Spoiler alert.
And if you happen to be in our convoy of people who watch movies ahead of time, next week we are going to be doing our final Batman movie. It is The Dark Knight Rises.
He rises.
It is what it is. All right. Let's just do it, David. Do it.
Just do it,
What are you giving this out of 10?
Mank has some sharp ideas, but for a movie about a writer whose bite ruined his career, it's missing some of its teeth. 7.1.
Wow, okay. All right.
7.1.
So I originally wrote, the first thing I wrote about this movie was, David Fincher does a Coen Brothers movie, ? And then I was like, no. And then, so I guess my actual slogan would no. Okay, so that's the first part of my slogan. The second part is, I don't know what this is. Hollywood something. 5 out of 10.
David Fincher does an oopsie?
It was a mess. I don't know. We'll talk about it.
Mank is like the most poignant, well-crafted, and beautifully illustrated joke that flew right over my head. 5 out of 10.
Oh,
but
why do we always give the same rating, James?
You gave it a 5?
Yeah.
I wasn't listening to you.
It's ridiculous.
Well, the thing is, I'm giving a caveat, though, because I really believe that with some education and repeated watchings, like this could be, I'm sure there's people out there where this is a 10. Like it seems like it's really sick if you know what the hell is going on, and if you're educated enough in Hollywood lore to be able to spot all the Easter eggs, like, oh, that's that actor sitting in the other side of the party. Oh, that's so funny.
Yeah.
And the quick-witted dialogue where they're dissing people.
Oh, definitely.
People like me and Riley don't even know who these people are. I don't understand these Marx Brothers jokes, but some people do. So I'm sure this is a very good movie, but just from my own experience, I just didn't get it.
Honestly, my rating is also extremely subjective. Basically, everything you said. This might be an 8 or 9 out of 10. I'm too stupid to be able to rate it that.
But in our defense, I think most people are.
Exactly.
And like this movie will be, the Netflix data for retention will just be like, everyone's getting out of there in 5 minutes, and then some people getting to the end and just like loving it.
Yeah, 2 thumbs up.
Yeah, you needed a David. I spent most of this movie explaining what was happening to Michaela.
Needed a David.
Yeah, I would love to watch this movie with someone who's going to pause and be like, okay, this is what they're doing here.
Honestly,
and I missed a lot too. Like, not to, there's a lot of stuff that I had to like, halfway through I paused, I went to the Wikipedia and I was like, who's this? I was like, oh, that's that person? Oh.
Well,
and
honestly,
it became like more interesting as I kind of understood it. And it's,
There were points where I thought about doing that.
Yep.
And then I'm like, but this is homework. I don't want to have to go research. Like the movie should give you all of the information
100%.
you need.
And this is a movie you should 100% watch with subtitles because they mention people's names once and they're very important. And then you're like, when did he show up? And you're like, oh, that's that person?
Yeah,
Oh.
They do not hold your hand in this movie. It's not like The Big Short or something where they're like, we know we're doing complicated subject matter, but we're going to pause it and show you a fun way of understanding what derivatives are.
Yeah.
But no, they're just like, we hope that you're a cinephile on this level, and if you are, then you're going to love this and soak it up.
Man, I think I know the perfect context that this movie could be shown in. But I think we should talk about that after.
Oh, this message from our sponsor! Carpool Critics is supported by Manscaped. Their performance package kit. It comes with a ton of stuff, including their new lawnmower waterproof trimmer with advanced skin-safe technology, which helps reduce nicks and cuts. Their crop preserver ball deodorant. Weed whacker nose and ear hair trimmer if you're old. And I'm so generalized. All the people with ear hair that I know are old. And their new Shears 2.0 luxury nail kit. Dang. Head to manscaped.com/carpool20 today and get 20% off. Plus free international shipping. What?
Whoa.
Plus you'll get their Shed travel bag. It's the kit goes in the bag. It's got a good zipper. It's the best part of the thing, really. And a pair of their anti-chafing boxer briefs, available for a limited time. We are also brought to you by Private Internet Access VPN. PIA helps you hide your true IP address so that you can bypass geo restrictions and censorship. You can connect up to 10 devices at once, and it includes an internet kill switch.
I don't know what that was.
If your VPN gets disconnected involuntarily. That's like trying to pee when you have a broken hip. PIA is available for Windows, Mac, Android, iOS, and even as a goddamn Chrome extension, Mank, so check it out.
Mank?
Check it out, you lemon, at the lmg.gg/carpoolcritics. I was like really trying to think of like 30s and 40s slang. I just totally blanked.
Yeah, crazy lemon man. I think that what that sound was actually was me, my interest dying in the movie. But the context that I thought was really good, that might be really good for this movie, is like a film class where you're studying 1930s Hollywood and you're like learning about all the players and how the studios worked and all that stuff. I mean, maybe it's not a film class, it's a film history class or something. And so then you show this movie and you're like, I kind of have context for what's going on.
You show it in the 13th week when they've already learned all that
Right,
stuff.
yeah.
I think the great success of this movie is how much it is indulgent in old Hollywood, and like you said, it's for people that want to relive there. It does such a good job bringing it to life. It does such a good job showing you these things. But I think the movie has a lot of failings even in those things that I want to get into more after our spot. Well, we just did our sponsor.
Is that a synopsis?
Yeah.
Synopsis!
I
Normally-
stole your sponsor segue.
Normally, the synopsis is for reminding everyone because they haven't seen this movie in a long time. But really, I just want to know what happened at all. You must have learned a lot writing this synopsis.
I think you're going to be disappointed because the synopsis. This movie takes place between 1933 and 1940, and just like the Citizen Kane screenplay, it jumps back and forth in time. It's non-linear. It's kind of dense. So you're going to be disappointed by this, but I'll do my best here, guys, okay? Mank, the movie, directed by David Fincher, captures the life of scathing social critic and alcoholic screenwriter Herman J. Mankiewicz between 1933 and 1940, period. The year that Mank is recruited to write a screenplay for the young actor, director, and writer prodigy Orson Welles. Flashbacks tell us of Mank's incendiary life in Hollywood and tensions between studios and the socialist candidate for governor of California, Upton Sinclair. Mank's screenplay is dense, non-linear, and based on a fictionalized version of the newspaper tycoon William Randolph Hearst. Eventually, Welles offers to give Mank a buyout for the script, but Herman wants credit, believing it's the best thing he's ever written. The two end up sharing credit, and both win the Academy Award for Best Original Screenplay for the film in 1942. It's still unclear what the hell happened.
No. Okay.
There's so much.
Wow. That was like your most...
Listen, I can't write it in chronologically because I'm just like, it wouldn't make any sense. So I just gave just a summary. Okay, that wasn't a synopsis. It was a summary.
I love that the movie is presented non-linearly like Citizen Kane, but I think this movie really fails in the first half to use that non-linearity to like enhance its story. Like it's giving you these flashbacks. It's like it'll be like a scene will happen and then it'll go back and it'll like kind of give you a bit of character moment to understand what happened.
Yeah.
But it's not as tightly integrated as it is in Citizen Kane. In Citizen Kane, when it's flashing back, everything is connected. Every cut is important. And in this movie, I felt like I would call this movie just meandering.
Do you have an example of like a sick integrated cut? This reminds me of the time like someone kicks him in the shin. He's like, oh, my shin, just like back in Nam.
Sort of. I can't think of specific ones, but like as an old man, he'll be telling a story or he'll like have a feeling and then it'll like be on his face and then it'll like do a camera move and then it'll cut to him being young. And like it does a lot of jumping, but it feels like it's pushing forward. Whereas in this movie, mostly when it's cutting through time, it just feels like it's trying to be Citizen Kane.
I just found these flashbacks so disorienting. Like,
yeah, even with the screen on text, like the text on screen, which I thought was like really distracting, it was still confusing.
Well, even that in itself is like, a lot of people are going to be like, what the hell is that? Because it's the way that when they go backward in time, usually in a normal movie, it would just be like 6 years earlier or whatever. But instead, they show what's called the slug line from a screenplay. It's a formatting thing when you're writing a screenplay. And the slug line just sets up for everyone involved in making the movie what set they're on, what time of the day it is for lighting and stuff like that, and the relation of that scene to the previous scene. So is it later or is it continuous?
Yeah, it'll say like interior, the studios.
So the int or ext, int or ext just means are you inside or outside? So that's the most confusing thing because people don't know that jargon, and it's the beginning of the slug line. So.
But to be fair, like if you don't know that jargon and you're trying to watch this movie, you're in big trouble already. You've made a huge mistake.
But I think the reason that, for me, why the flashbacks didn't really work is that they work, but they just weren't framed in a way. Like at the beginning of the movie, in the first 5 or 10 minutes, I am waiting for the reason to care.
Yeah.
You know, like, okay, what's this movie about? Why do I care?
Right.
And I think they kind of screwed up because the way that they launched back into the flashback is not preceded by a good reason to do that.
100%.
It's preceded by, I think... So the person he's dictating to, right? He's in bed. He has to dictate so she can use the typewriter for him. He dictates to her, and she figures out by listening to the story who the story is about. So she's like, oh, you knew that guy? How'd you meet him? And he goes, well, first I met his girlfriend or lover. And then that's when the flashback starts where it's like, here's him meeting her lover.
Yeah.
Or meeting his lover. So instead of it being like, well, I'm writing this because so I've seen some crazy crap in my day, or like framing it for what his overall goal is in this movie is, like the movie is really about a guy who goes from writing like crappy Hollywood monster movies at the beginning of the movie to a guy who's going to be like, risk it all and risk his career and put it all on the line and write something transgressive and scathing. And then own the fact that he's doing that to the extent that this is great. I'm not hiding. I actually want credit on this.
Right.
Which is backing out on a deal.
He could have written it and just, avoided any criticism and like the scandal of it by just not taking credit.
So that's like the arc, but we don't know that unless we like already know that.
Well, and I think the movie really fails to focus on that arc. Like it really feels like it's more an experiential movie. It doesn't feel narrative driven where it's very clear this is his goal and it's about him writing this script and coming to this realization that like he has to make something important. It feels like it's just watching him through 5 years of being a Hollywood scriptwriter.
Yeah.
And like eventually we kind of happen to do Citizen Kane. And that's like one of my big nitpicks is like they barely talk about Citizen Kane. Like it's what they advertised was a movie about like the scriptwriter of Citizen Kane writing Citizen Kane and like all the drama behind the scenes. There's like barely any of that.
It is cool when we get to see Orson Welles.
Sort of. I think
those moments are cool.
I
There's like two of them.
I think the voice that he does is excellent.
Fantastic.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
But his look is weird. Like I never bought him. I mean, like it's hard. It's hard to do that. But Orson Welles is kind of a unique looking person. Yeah.
Change your face, Tom Burke.
The voice though made me realize like that I know what Orson Welles' voice is like, not from hearing Orson Welles, but from hearing some kind of cartoon character based on Orson Welles. I can't tell if it's like Pinky in the Brain or if it's...
Maurice LaMarche does a really good Orson Welles.
Is that what it is?
Yeah.
Like he has that weird inflection at the end of some of his words. It's so characteristic.
Yeah, I'm not going to try and do it because I forget.
If you guys don't know who Orson Welles is, you should probably...
I mean...
People know about... I think that one of the most famous things he did was the War of the Worlds. It was a radio show, and then it was kind of
that was him.
Yeah, it was like a hoax.
I'm always
People thought that
confused.
aliens were actually landing because this like story was so good and the way that it was set up.
But what did he didn't? What did he do for that?
He read it.
He
Because he was an
didn't write
actor
it.
first, and he was part of a theater troupe, and then he got this opportunity to do Citizen Kane. And it's still up for debate, even though this movie totally chooses a side who wrote Citizen Kane.
Yeah.
So it's still up for debate
I
how
know.
much Mankiewicz and how much Wells is actually
Right.
There
wrote.
was an article in the New Yorker that basically said that Wells did nothing. And then I think that's when the screenplay was like kind of
a
started to
book.
be written. But then there was a bunch of historians kind of discredited that article since then. And earlier iterations of the script were more on Mank's side than Wells, and they actually dialed it back a bit.
That's good.
Yeah, I'm confused why this movie took such a hard tack that it was all Mank and like Orson Welles did basically nothing.
So I mean, this movie was written by David Fincher's dad.
Yeah.
Oh, that's
Yeah.
who Jack Fincher is.
Jack Fincher is his
As it
dad,
came
and
up,
he
I was
wrote
like,
it in the '90s, and he was originally going to direct it after the game, but then it kind of got sidetracked, and he's finally making it.
Yeah, and he was gonna have Jodie Foster and Kevin Spacey as the leads.
Interesting. He could have. I mean, like they're good actors. They could
Kevin
have pulled it
Spacey
off.
probably could have done a good Orson Welles. That's not the lead, but still.
I think he looks more like Mank than Gordon here does.
But I think that like
Commissioner Gordon.
I think Jack Fincher did a really good job in terms of the dialogue and like setting up the character moments. But I think there really needed revision of the script to just like focus it in on something. Like it feels so pointless.
But at the same time, though, it kind of feels like it came out the same era as Citizen Kane.
A
No,
little
they
bit,
did
but
such a good job
but
of that.
Sort of. And I mean, I want to get into that. I think there's a lot of like visual iconography that's very interesting in this
Yeah.
movie. But I think that like this movie, in terms of narrative, in terms of themes, it does the lip service of bringing stuff up, but it never has anything else to support it. There's no visuals, there's no story beats,
Right.
there's no like stuff to support these bigger ideas that it wants to talk about. And like having a character say a line isn't good enough in a movie. You can't just have a character be like, well, like capitalism beats communism every time. Like you need to have a story beat around that. You need to have a thing. And like this movie tries so hard and so often to bring up really important things. And I think
Yeah.
sometimes it does. But this script just needed to be reworked.
It needed to be about something.
Yeah.
Other than
He wasn't a screenwriter though.
Yeah, and he did a good job. I don't want to like hate on him, but
this was written, but Jack Fincher hadn't really done screenplays before this.
He wrote screenplays after he had retired. He had worked at a magazine, I believe. Yeah, so
Wait, just like Mankiewicz.
and I don't know.
guy?
I'm sure there's other people with writing credits, or even if they're uncredited, I'm sure they went through and kind of changed stuff around for this.
But I just get the feeling that this movie, I think this movie retooled, re-edited could be like a 9, even if you don't know what's happening. If they didn't even handhold it a little bit, but they just made things clearer what the emotion behind it is, because there's so much where people are having a fight that's like really kind of understated, and you just like, unless you really know what happened, you don't get it. But a movie should bring you there. A movie should make you be able to feel those things, even if you don't have the outside knowledge.
That was one of the most frustrating things to me, because there are tons of characters in this movie, and they're all introduced, and we barely get to know them at all until then. Suddenly, they have these interactions where like references to personal histories are made, and there's like subtlety to how their interaction and to how they're interacting, and like there's not a ton to give us an understanding of the background of what's going on. And so it just makes me bored. It just like completely disengages my interest.
Totally.
Because I honestly felt a little insulted. Watching this movie, I was like, how dare you make me watch this movie? It almost felt like somebody who has like a super, super, super specific love or like interest, and they are like super into it. And it's so specific, and they put a ton of work into like, let's say it's like painting the Dungeons and Dragons little figurines or something. Yeah. They like love it, and they spend hours and hours and hours, and they make this, and it's like really impressive, the amount of work and like passion that they've poured into it. But then they show it to you, and you don't know what the hell you're looking at, and you're like, hey man, good job. And it's like that, except it's being forced upon you. I was forced to watch this movie. David Fincher came to my apartment, gunpoint. Yeah.
It really sucks too, because I was so stoked for this. I like David Fincher movies a lot.
I love David Fincher.
And I was like, this is cool. Yeah. I like the premise of what this is all about. Yeah. But if it hadn't been for this episode, I probably would have turned it off.
Oh, same.
Totally.
I think it's a good movie. And I don't think it in anyone. Oh, that's not true. In very few people's worlds, this is a 9. I think at most it's an 8. And I want to talk a little bit about the stuff that's really good.
On the subreddit, like the just movies subreddit, there's often a poll attached to a new release. The average was 8. A lot of people on that subreddit, there's a lot of people.
Wait, which subreddit?
I believe it's just r/movies.
Well, that makes sense, though.
Yeah.
Well, that's a lot of people who really like this movie.
People who are like into movies.
We're supposed to be into movies.
Well,
and yeah,
I'm having an identity crisis here.
Movies are okay.
I think this is a very, like Riley said, it's a very specific era of Hollywood. Like there's not many 1940s movies that we hold dear today. Like obviously Casablanca, Citizen Kane, like are movies that even 80 years later are important to watch. But we don't really have a knowledge of the politics of Hollywood. And part of that is that Hollywood likes to rewrite its history constantly. And I think that this movie does that. And I want to get into that later, but I want to get into the good stuff.
Let's talk about some good stuff.
Which is the eye candy. This movie looks great. And I think my favorite thing about this movie is the production design. I think they did such a good job recreating that era. The costumes, the sets are so good. I'm guessing that there's some parts that are like the backgrounds are CG where they need to make the city feel bigger, and they can't really build a full 40 city. But overall, I think that they did a really good job bringing it to life. The film style, on the other hand, I don't really like. I think that you're differentiating between the aesthetics and the actual like cinematography. Yes, and the actual. So I was kind of curious as watching this movie. It looks really modern, and I was like, okay. They must have shot it on like a modern camera or
it's all
whatever.
digital.
Right. And I felt like it seemed to me like one of those black and white movies that they shot color and cranked down the saturation to make it black and white, because it doesn't feel like it's like it's intended to be black and white. But I was wrong. It's shot on the brand new red 8K large sensor monochrome only camera. So it's a black and white camera.
What?
But it's like a cutting edge camera.
It's a camera that's designed to do black and white only?
Yes, and there's a lot of advantages to doing black and white. Yeah, and it's a large format sensor. And so these are all things that don't exist at all, and nothing is able to replicate this in the 40s. And so it goes to kind of undo a little bit of that 40s authenticity.
They added a ton of grain and stuff to it
Yeah.
to make it. And did you notice they even have those like cigarette burns?
Yeah.
Like
I like that.
they talk about in Fight Club.
Yeah.
But okay, here's the question though. I also noticed. I don't know if you guys noticed this. A lot of time, you would see, especially if a character's talking, they're just like on a mid shot. The like hue would change. It would kind of pulse to like
Yeah.
a green and then go back to sepia. What was that?
I'm not sure. I think it's
Is that something that used to happen?
Yeah, maybe.
Because they did a lot of choices to
Love
make it feel like you're watching this movie in the 40s.
No, for
Yeah.
sure.
Like the sound design was like that. Did you notice that?
I love the sound design. I think that was.
Okay, wait. Before we go on to
please.
sound design, I want to say something about this aesthetic because I think I can agree with you that it's like extremely well executed, right?
Yeah.
Like I'm watching this and I was like, oh, this is kind of cool that they did this, but the end result is not like it. I have to be honest, it bothers me. It's kind of like, you know, something that I can recognize a lot of work and passion and creativity was put into, but the end result is not something that tickles my fancy, you know?
That's
Or
fair.
are you in your mind? Does the end result look like an old movie, or does it look like what are you saying?
I think what I wrote down about this was that there's a reason, like movies have progressed, you know? Movies looked like this back then because there wasn't any alternative.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like, why are we going back to this and making movies
it's
look
like,
worse?
It's like
again
giving
on
birth at
purpose?
home in the bathtub. You're like, we have doctors.
Hey, no offense to anybody doing
Yeah.
home births,
I
but,
think
but
that-
yeah, kind of.
I think there's a justification for doing black and white movies. Like movies like The Artist, I think do it to a great effect. And I think
And
that's shot
Roma.
on film.
Roma looked great.
Roma looks good.
Black and white.
See, I'm fine with doing black and
Nebraska.
white.
But okay, then
I'm fine with black and white
sorry,
films.
Finish your thought.
I know what you're saying.
But I think that it was the softness of the film, that there was like a lighting effect that was weird. The audio, we'll get into the audio, but like there was sort of like an echoey thing. There was static in the background. I was just kind of like, I don't need to be transported back this hard.
I think though what you're feeling is the movie's inability to commit one way or the other. I think
Okay.
that the fact that the aesthetic is half cutting edge and half retro does the movie a huge disservice, where it doesn't feel that authentic. Even like,
Right.
I mean, I'm hyper aware of these things, but I think even most people that aren't hyper aware of like what cameras are being used, you can sense that there's something inauthentic about the way this looks. Like it doesn't look like a 40s movie. It looks like a 2020 super HDR, super sharp, like
It was
high
kinda
contrast
like,
movie.
There was almost kind of like Sin City vibes.
100%.
where it, like it looks kind of fake, you know,
100%.
because of the like CGI
Yeah.
used in some places
Yeah.
and
And
this
there's-
kind of like fake glow effect that's going on.
Totally. Yeah,
like,
there's-
I think I'm with you that if they did this and kind of tried to emulate the cinematography of the era,
100%.
maybe I'd be more into it.
Yeah, and
I
think,
don't know.
I think that they do a few weird choices. Like there's a lens flare when Mank first meets her lover, and there's like a big light behind them, and it's a lens flare, and it just feels so modern. And it might be a replicated vintage one. I might be totally off, but it just felt like such a modern image
To me,
to have a lens flare right in the frame.
The scene that looked like, I haven't seen a lot of old stuff, but I've watched like the whole first season of The Twilight Zone,
Mm-hmm.
and so that's a reference point for me. And the scene that looked the most like old was when he is flashing back to the car accident, and then there's a shot of the ruined, wrecked cars and like a crane pulling the stretcher out. And
Yeah.
just the way that was lit and everything, I was
Yep.
like, that is perfect. They nailed that.
And like lighting now is so different because cameras are much more versatile, where you can have scenes that have much less light and it still looks good. Whereas back then you just had to blast light. It was as much light as you could get on it. Like we have different theories for how you should light scenes than we used to. And so this movie has chosen a modern aesthetic, even though it's trying to reach into the past. And I found the split just didn't work for me at all. And it sounds like it didn't really work for you guys either.
No.
Let's go into the audio realm
Yeah.
now, because I noticed the first thing I noticed was like there's a lot of reverb.
Yeah.
It's wet.
Yes.
It's wet AF.
It's a wet audio.
I noticed that in the first scene, but then I thought it was like, oh, this is cool. I guess it's a really echoey, like reflective room they're in. And okay, Fincher movies, sound design are lit.
So
like they're
good.
so good. In
So
Seven, we talked about this a bit in the Seven episode, but I never said specifically that was the first movie where I paused it because I thought the sound was in my house. They're in their apartment, and you can hear neighbors in the apartment
Yeah,
next
yeah.
door
It's so
talking
rich.
and muffled through
Yeah.
the walls. And
So
I thought
good.
that it was my neighbors getting mad at me or something. I paused it. So as soon as it starts, I'm like, oh, it sounds great. But then I noticed that they're going outside.
Yeah.
And they're outdoors, and it's still echoey
Yeah.
and reflective. And then I guess their intention was that they wanted to have the experience of the sound that you hear when you're in an old movie. If you're seeing this movie in the theater back when that era, this is what it would sound like. And that's a weird choice, because it's like do you want it to sound like what it would be like in that theater watching the movie, or do you want it to sound like what the movie would sound like if I'm watching the movie in a home theater?
I think it's an interesting choice, and I'm really excited for kind of more of the behind the scenes to come out, because I bet there was a version of this movie where the flashbacks had the muffled audio and the current day didn't, or like they probably played around with it in some ways, because it's a really bold choice to like really roll off your curve that much. Like there's no high end at all in this movie.
They compressed the crap out of it.
They compressed the fuck out of this audio, and I think my personal preference is that they would have gone full in on the retro. And so I like this choice to go retro audio and have it be kind of more authentic to that era. And I think my favorite part is the voices. Like there's something about what it does to voices, I think in particular, that I really like. And it makes the people feel like they belong in that era a lot more. Cause like mics we have now, the way we treat audio is so different.
Yeah. There's almost like a sort of a distortion-y, it's hard to describe, but like, when they kind of go up in volume, there's sort of a distortion.
Like it
that
almost
happens.
clips.
Yeah, because the recording equipment just wasn't at the same level back then. But like, it's almost pleasurable to hear that happen. You're just kind of like, ooh, I don't know.
totally.
It's
But I felt it was
it's not a harsh distortion. It's like warm.
Immersion breaking though, when I notice that they're outside and it's still echoey, then suddenly it feels like ADR. It feels like they recorded this separately.
Yeah, maybe. It almost seemed to me like it felt like I was in a theater or something.
Well, that's what they wanted.
Well, there you go.
And I mean, it's possible that there is a lot of ADR that I didn't even realize, because like that's just what they did back then when they shot outside. They never got good audio, so they just everything ADR.
Sticking with the warm or the good stuff. I also loved the way that they talked, as you were saying, kind of like the emulation of the acting style of that period was like really good. And the writing as well. Like as much as I have problems with the structure of the screenplay, the writing in each scene,
very good.
But it's almost like it's so good that it just flies right past you.
It's fast.
There's so many little and like you said, I think it's essential to watch this movie with subtitles
100%.
because there's so many little references and little puns.
Like when he sees her tied up and he's like, "Oh, like
dude, that's what I wrote down too."
Exactly.
What's at stake here?
Yeah, amazing.
She's like tied at a stake.
Yeah,
there's a ton of those.
Yeah.
I think
there's too many.
Yeah.
It's so good.
They really nail the way those people speak, and I think that comes through in the portrayal of the characters too. Like I think everyone brings an incredible performance. I don't think there was a weak performance in the entire movie. Like
the criticism I've seen though, and I kind of agree with it, goes back to what you were saying earlier. It's like it's so well cast, and all these supporting roles did amazing jobs, but we just don't get that much of anybody.
100%.
Right.
And like, I mean, let's focus on the main people. Like Gary Oldman. Gary
he's
Oldman
gonna get Oscars for this.
He might. Like, I think he'll certainly get nominated. I'd be totally down
of
for
course
that. I hope this movie doesn't get.
But he already
too much else.
he got Best Actor pretty recently. They can give him again. He
He could start Meryl Streeping late in life.
Meryl Streep doesn't have the most
Really?
Oscars. No, the two people with the most
it's
Oscars is for actors.
Actors
is 4, and it's Audrey Hepburn and Daniel Day-Lewis.
How many does she have? I thought she had more than that.
But the person with the most Oscars overall is a costume designer, I believe.
Yeah.
Good
But I guess she has
them.
the most nominations. She just doesn't have.
Oh, maybe.
I think
she's only won 3.
I think Gary Oldman will definitely get Oscar nominations for this, but that's also why I'm annoyed again at this film, because it seems to basically just
Oscar bait?
Oscar bait. It's
100%.
It's a vehicle for Gary Oldman to be like, look at this character I can
And
play.
remember, I want to talk about it later, but how circle jerky Hollywood is, and that's I guess, such an essential piece.
Well, even outside of that, just the fact that if this movie caters to a person with a certain knowledge base, there's going to be a higher number of those people in Hollywood.
100%.
Now we're getting back to the bad stuff.
I want to.
Oh no! What?
No, I just wanna-
Let's talk about his performance a little more, because he doesn't look like Mank at all.
Yeah.
And he had suggested to Fincher, like, look, I can pluck my hairline back, and we can put a prosthetic on my nose. But Fincher wanted zero artifice, and he said, even if you're going to be 20 years older, like he's 60 or something now. If you're and he's playing playing Mank in 30s and 40s.
Honestly,
and so.
He's
but
60
he didn't
years
care.
old, but he's playing him as like a 30-something old man in addition to like in 1933 they were supposed to believe this guy is like 30
Although Mank
37?
Mank himself apparently looked a little older than he was.
Yeah, people
That's not a little older.
People in that era look way older than they do.
Honestly,
now.
when I saw him with his wife,
I was like, is
poor
that his
Sarah,
daughter?
I was like,
His
they're
ward?
like 30 years apart. what is this? And I guess that's like not entirely uncommon, I guess,
Yeah.
because but she was a mistress.
But they actually in real life weren't though. So
Yeah, and that's what's so confusing about it. I was like, is this his daughter? When I first saw her, I was like, who is this his daughter?
like she's
No.
taking off his pants, but like maybe she's his
It felt
employee.
weird.
I had no idea. But anyway, the
looked so
point
young.
is, they wanted to cast an actor's actor, and they wanted zero artifice between that actor and the crowd, and so Fincher was just like, all that other stuff is nice to have, but screw it. Like,
And,
I
like-
just want an epic performance, and that's what he got.
None of us know what Mank looks like, so it
Exactly.
doesn't matter. It's
What
not
do you
like
mean none of us know what he looks like? Oh, like common people.
yeah,
don't.
common people.
Yeah.
know,
It
you know
is
what I mean?
known what he looks like. There's pictures of him.
Yeah, but like we watched the movie and we're like, sure.
Yeah, when Gary Oldman did Winston Churchill,
Yeah.
in The Darkest
We all
Hour,
know what Winston
Yeah, it's
Churchill-
like he has to put on the fat suit and the
Cigar and
make him look like Winston Churchill because everyone knows what Winston Churchill looks like. But yeah, we don't.
As an aside, John Lithgow also an amazing Churchill in The Crown.
I haven't watched The Crown.
Me neither.
Yeah, well, whatever.
Aside over.
Yeah, that's it. Back to the main line.
I love Amanda
Not
Seyfried.
allowed to talk about The Crown, huh?
I don't always love Amanda Seyfried, but she was really good in this movie.
What else is she in?
Mamma Mia.
Here we go again. My.
Mamma Mia.
How did I
Les-
forget
Les
that?
Mis.
She's in a ton of
She's
stuff.
in a ton of stuff.
But
You guys didn't even see what I just did there.
Here we go again.
All of that. I just said like the whole verse.
I ignored it on purpose.
Take a chance, and it didn't work.
She was great.
Yeah, she was really good, and like I think she disappeared into that role more than I think even Gary Oldman did.
Oh, for sure.
I was
Well,
just like,
it's a
that's
rich
just-
man's world. I'm just still doing this. Yeah, she was good.
I wasn't really familiar with the actress that she was playing at all, but
Yeah.
I totally believed that she was this character.
Marion Davies.
Marion Davies.
Oh, can I take a
Marion
second
Davies
to
that-
say how mad I was that there was like a Marion, a Mariam, and a Meyer? There's so many M names that were so close. Like,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hurst.
Yeah, I think for me, this movie kind of picks up and becomes as good as it does once we become acquainted with the villains of the movie. Like once you get to know Mayer and that sub-level dude.
Yeah.
and
the
there's
producer guy, Thatcher or
yeah,
something?
and there becomes a threat. I think the movie kind of gets a little bit of momentum compared to the beginning. Like the first hour, like whatever, I felt zero tension. I was just like, whatever, who cares? But once we get introduced to those characters and you understand, okay, his career is kind of on the line, like they're playing this game and there becomes more at stake. There's this outside politics game. There's the use of media for kind of nefarious purposes. Then it becomes more interesting. And I thought those characters were awesome. Like I really liked Mayer. Like I thought it was such a great performance when he's giving that speech to the film people and he's like, we're going to have to do a pay cut for 8 weeks. And like the back of his mind, he knows he's never giving that money back.
He talks about them being a family.
Yeah. And he cries and then walks
Yeah.
away and he's just like, I'm fine.
And then he asks his aide, he's like, how did I do? And he's
Yeah.
like, you did great. He's like, okay.
this
love
morning, I
that.
put the movie on for the second time.
Yeah.
And because I was up early and I watched the first half hour again, and it's more now that I knew like who the antagonists were instead of just meeting just more side characters.
Yeah.
I think we've talked about this before, like whether or not a good movie is good on watch number one versus being really good on subsequent watches. But this one really, I think you can get a lot more of it on a rewatch.
I believe that.
If you can stomach a rewatch, I'd like to watch it again, but my wife would be like, no.
Yeah, I feel the same. I'm like, I'm mentally prepared to do a rewatch because I know I missed so much. And
You're
it
going to
might-
watch this movie again?
For sure, not anytime soon, but
Jeez.
I find it interesting. It's like a turning point in Hollywood. It's like when the division of power was split drastically. It used to be like there was obviously a division of power, but like at that moment, it changed Hollywood. It changed that like the below the line workers would never ever be competitive and pay with anyone else. Like it totally split the actors and the producers way above, and like that division never went back. And I want them to delve into that. I don't want them to like go into more witty conversations about Mank. Like I know Mank. I know these things. I want to know like these nefarious politics that are at play that still
Honestly,
affect our world today.
Honestly, I completely agree. I feel like if the movie focused more on those kind of issues, I would have been way more engaged. But I
Totally.
think that you get the character of Mank pretty early on, and you're like, all right, I get who this guy is. But then the movie still takes the entire rest of its runtime to show you again and again and again and again and again who Mank is.
Totally.
And we're like, okay, fine.
Yeah.
But like, what's going on out there? And like I think it was interesting to have that sort of subplot about California politics and how Upton Sinclair, super randomly played by Bill Nye.
Very randomly.
I was like, what? I was like, is that fucking Bill Nye?
And they're aware that it's fucking Bill Nye because they don't even give him a close-up or straight-on shot. You see him in profile from 50 feet away, and you're
So
like,
weird.
huh?
Yeah, and like that B plot has the potential to be a movie,
Right?
Where like these people are using their power of media to influence people, and they're creating this narrative about the Republican.
Well, they did focus on that a bit more than anything else, and the reason they did that is because it's 2020 and fake news is a real thing.
But I wanted more. Like I want like so much more of the movie to be about that. Like how Mank has to deal with like how he's using his influence for good or bad, and like bringing that emotional center to more of the movie, because like that part of the movie is so engrossing, and like that newsreel they show of like the Russian guy being like, I think that guy's great because he reminds me of a Russian comrade, and you're like, this is fucked up, like this is all fake, and like that to me could have been like drawn out and brought into the entire movie instead of just being enclosed in this like 15-minute segment.
Like, so I'm not sure how heavily Mank was involved in all that stuff, and maybe that's why they didn't go super hard with it. But
maybe
I gotta say, them including a lot of that in this movie and not really delving that much deeper into it was I was kind of like, there's a movie that I want to watch, and it's gone.
One of my major nitpicks is tied to that though, and I don't know how much of it is tied to the real story or not. But it's when the guy who did the fake reel, his wife is like, he's gone. He took the gun, like, go find him. And he goes to the guy, and he's like drunk and has a gun, and he's like kind of having suicidal talk. And he's like, give me the gun. And he like unloads the bullets and gives it to him. And like, that's that. He goes back to his wife, gives her the bullets. And she's like, you had a whole box of bullets, you fucking moron. Like, I thought that was so stupid. I'm like,
yes,
just take the gun. Just take the fucking gun.
Well, you can't just take someone's gun. These things are expensive.
Well, but he's there to stop him from killing himself, and he half-asses it.
Yeah.
Instead of being like, listen, man, life's worth living, okay? You made a mistake, but we all make mistakes.
Yeah.
Hey, it's okay. It's going to be fine. Now give me the bullets. Do not kill yourself. And he's like, okay, here's the bullets. Well, my job's done.
He doesn't stay with him. Like, he's still drinking.
And then the way that they reveal that he has that, I don't know, he goes to his wife's, and he gives her the bullets, and then he starts walking away. She closes the door, and then she's like, like opens the door. It's like, oh my god, he had a whole box.
Yeah, and it's like, what did you think he handed you? Like,
it was just a little.
Yeah. Well, it's almost as comedic timing where like then it'll then cut to a shot of the window and then it flashes, and like if it wasn't such shocking subject matter, it'd be like good comedic beats.
Yeah, no, absolutely. If it wasn't, if it would have been funny otherwise. Yeah. I don't know, man.
But I think one thing in this movie that they really failed to do is is tying the visuals to the theme. Like obviously there's the iconography of the 40s and like the look, but they don't really use visual storytelling to tell the theme. Like at the Republican Party, there's an excellent image, and I think it's not utilized at all. It's that melted elephant sculpture, the ice sculpture, and it's like the way that it's melted, it tells a story of like a thing that's like lost its edge with age, or like it's gone, it's dying, or like something is happening. Like there's a way to use that image to tell the theme of this movie, but it's not at all tied.
So you're saying
to
production design knew that?
Yeah.
They made this thing with intention.
Yeah.
They placed it with purpose.
Yeah.
But then it's just
totally, because
underutilized.
another movie would have like a
push into it.
Yeah, a push into it, or like have a conversation about how like all things die. Like these are terrible ideas, but like you get the idea that you use that image to enforce something that's happening in that scene. And instead this movie has all these machine gun approaches of good ideas, but none of them are connecting together, and it's so frustrating because there's so much good here.
I completely agree. I feel like this whole bit about the socialist revolution or whatever, that's kind of like talk of it that's unfolding in the background is just that. It's just background. Yep. And it's a waste. It seems like a waste to me that all these interesting ideas and like cool historical moments are happening. Yeah. And they're basically just used as window dressing for Gary Oldman's acting showcase.
And like when you boil it down, like everything that's really interesting in this movie is the window dressing. It's all these things happening in the background, like, whoa, the background of Citizen Kane, whoa, the socialist revolution. And it's all supporting this totally mediocre story. And I think that's what it comes down to. Like, even if you do understand all this stuff, like the main through line of the story isn't that good.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I just
How about when he pukes though?
That's a great scene.
You think he really did that?
I don't know.
I'm just joking.
Puked.
Well, we didn't
Gary
even think you
Oldman's
would.
pretty intense.
It's just a wonder, and you just did it. We went
that
with it.
scene is a really good example of the non-linear storytelling, where it does like the first chunk of him like delivering that drunk monologue, and then it cuts back to a thing where you kind of get the context of his relationship with Meyer and Hearst, and then it cuts back, and it all has kind of like a new meaning from this like multi-scene cutting. That works really well.
Well, it's probably necessary because you just could not have such a huge monologue.
Totally.
Man,
Well, yeah,
you-
have you guys seen Citizen Kane?
Yeah.
I have not.
Okay. Do you know who like William Hearst is?
But I looked him up.
Okay.
so
This
now I
actually
sorta know.
confused me.
Yeah.
Because I didn't know that he had. I only saw the movie. I saw Citizen Kane once, like 2 years ago, and I knew that he was like a news magnate, but I didn't know that he had, like Howard Hughes, a period in his life where he like produced movies. And so when we meet Hearst on the set, he looks like he's a director, like a big time director. And so I'm like, wait, so is this guy actually the dude Citizen Kane is based on, or is this like a fictionalized dude that the fictional character is based on? Is he a? Because I don't think we see him like doing news stuff.
No, we never do.
We never see him in an office building with newspapers and crap.
No.
I just thought he was like another auteur director. I didn't even really clue in.
It took me a long time to realize that was Hearst, and then it was when I did my look on Wikipedia. I was like, holy fuck, this movie's starting to make sense, and like. Yeah, the movie didn't do a good job introducing him, I don't think. Because like you said, like in my head, William Hearst is like the Rupert Murdoch of that time. He's like a newspaper magnate.
Right.
But
I think we're just seeing him doing things with his money that he likes to do
Totally,
after he's
yeah.
already
And
made it.
I
he
like
like
that-
produced 2 movies in
Yeah.
the 30s.
and I like that character. I think like how he likes Mank is very interesting. And I think that to me goes to make Citizen Kane, the dynamic behind that, more interesting, where I'm like, oh, like they were friends, and like Hearst really respected him, and that's why it's so hurtful that Mank wrote these things about him and wrote this movie
Is there a
attacking
Mank?
him.
Is there a Mank character in Citizen Kane?
No, I don't think so.
Well,
I don't
who
think
would-
so.
What he self-insert?
There's like a friend of him like in his journalistic day that he kind of betrays, but like it's not really, it wouldn't be really a stand-in for Mank. But there's the Rosebud, like that's the infamous scene is Rosebud, and like the only way he was able to write that scene, because if you don't know, that's about
Spoilers.
Marian's
Spoilers for Citizen Kane.
Like,
So spoilers for Citizen Kane, fine, that's safe.
Yeah, it's in
okay.
The Simpsons, man.
Yeah,
Like
oh,
20
yeah.
years ago.
I'm
So,
gonna watch it, but
At the beginning
but yeah,
of the movie,
my
he
fault.
as he's dying, he says the name Rosebud, and it becomes really important. And at the end, you find out that Rosebud was his sled, and it's basically an image of his childhood lost, and that's what it's about. But in real life, Rosebud was the name of Marion Davies' vagina.
Okay.
And so it was like this weird fucked up attack, very personal on Hearst by Mank.
Jeez.
And it with this extra stuff, like it all becomes like, oh, that's really fucked up, Mank, dude. Like you shouldn't talk like you knew these people.
They
Like,
should have
Right.
put that in the movie.
yeah, like there's so many
well, there is a
interesting
reference
things.
to Rosebud in the movie.
They talk about it a little bit. And like
and they're talking like
they talk about the sled
This is
and
the thing.
stuff.
I haven't seen Citizen Kane,
Yeah.
but like I heard them talking about like how he put something called Rosebud in the script, and somebody was offended by that or hurt or something. And I haven't seen the movie, so I'm like, I have no idea what the context is, but I understood that it was some sort of controversial element.
Yeah. I always assumed that Mank was punching up, or Orson Welles. I actually didn't really know too much of the history before researching it after this movie, but I always assumed that they were punching up at Hearst, and they kind of are, but it's also like kind of their compatriot, like it's like their friend, and
Right.
it just makes it also twisted. And
It's
fucked
kind
up.
of like punching down because Mank is
Taller than
exploiting
Hearst. Oh.
not quite.
Sorry.
Hearst is pretty tall.
He is. Well, what's his name? Dance?
Tyrell Lannister.
Robert Dance? Charles Dance is
He's
tall.
great.
Because Mank is exploiting all of these personal details and relationships that
Yep.
he's built and learned about. So then it's sort of like punching down because he's like,
Yeah.
he's being rude.
He's an arc.
Yeah.
He's an arc.
What do you,
Yeah.
okay, so I think I understood most of the intention of a lot of the stuff in the movie. One scene that I found very compelling, but I didn't fully grasp, I guess, the meaning was when Mank has already had his drunken outburst at the party, and Hearst is walking.
The
about-
organ grinder
The organ
story.
grinder story. What's the significance of that story?
Oh,
I missed it.
what? I mean, Mank is the organ grinder's monkey.
Yeah, I get that, but that's it.
I think he's
I thought
basically
there was like
telling
another
him.
layer that I missed, but is it just that?
I
He's
think
just telling
that's
this
pretty
long
much
story?
it.
Oh, okay.
He's just telling Mank like, you think you're really original and
Yeah,
transgressive, but you're just
yeah.
dancing. You're
Okay.
just
He's
at
a
the end of a marionette string.
Okay.
Yeah, there's multiple. Well, I don't know if there's at least one time in the movie where someone calls him a court jester, obviously the writer likes to think of himself as this
The brain
like
behind it all,
intellectual creative force or whatever, but Hearst is there telling him like, no, I'm the one with power, I'm the important one, you're just my monkey.
I feel like that scene was too long for that point. I think they could have made that point.
I kind of like.
I feel like because I understood that point,
Yeah.
and I was like, "There's got to be something more to this." This is like a 2-minute walking talk scene, and like if that's it, like they need to get there way faster.
I think it was. I feel like I agree with you, but I think that drawing that out a bit was justified because they had referenced the parable of the monkey, the organ grinder monkey before.
That's fair. That's
and
fair.
I was like,
What is
what's that? I don't
Yeah.
know. And I almost Googled it, but then I didn't.
Thank
and
goodness.
then later they told me anyways, and I'm like, okay. And that's kind
fair.
of like the climax of the movie. It's around that point, so I was like, all right.
I still like the walk they do is almost worth the drawn outness of it because everyone's just been so uncomfortable that
Yeah.
they've all left, but Hearst is still there.
Yeah.
And then he walks with his arm over him. It's just, it's an
Yeah.
interesting dynamic.
Power,
He doesn't just go like, get the hell out of here.
Yeah.
No, I love
so-
that. Yeah,
And you're unsure of what he's gonna say. Like I was unsure whether Hearst would still kind of be like, "Hey, you insulted me, but you know what? It's all good.
Totally.
You're my monkey."
it honestly makes me like Citizen Kane less a little bit because I always imagined it was like this epic political takedown of this dude, and it is.
Oh, yeah.
But I'm like, this movie kind of makes me like Hearst. I'm
But
like,
yeah,
he
it's
seems like a pretty reasonable dude. Like
Well, except for the taking on a 30-year younger than yourself mistress, but sure.
that was the 30s and 40s, man.
Yeah, that's what you do.
Yeah,
That's what they do.
you still do that today if you're rich enough.
That's fair.
Indeed.
One thing I wanted to talk about, and we kind of briefly mentioned it, is the circle jerkiness of movies about Hollywood.
Thank you.
And this movie, this movie does it and doesn't because it's written by an outsider. Like Jack Fincher isn't a Hollywood type, but there's something so alarming about a movie like this. That's like, see, we totally get old Hollywood. We saw what they did wrong, and we're totally different. But it's like it's the same people. It's the same type of people that hold the power. Like nothing is really changed, but this masquerade of pretending like we understand how this power is misused by people.
I think there is value in kind of like peeling back the curtain a little bit and showing regular people how studios operate, even if it is, a century ago almost. But, the basic principles are the same where like studios, movies are released and we're like, oh, these are creative things. I'm excited for them. But really it's like they're vehicles for the studios to make money. And I think one of my favorite quotes from this movie is the part where L.B. Mayer, the guy, one of the heads of MGM,
Yeah, the second M in MGM.
is talking about the real magic of the movies, and he's like, wait, what does he say? Do you guys remember what I'm
Yeah,
talking
he says that the thing that you buy, the
about?
salesman
Yeah.
keeps.
Oh,
He's
I
like,
love
it's
that.
like the customer buys something, and at the end of the day, he doesn't own it, but
seller
the
still
person
owns
who
it.
sold it to him still owns it.
Yeah.
When we sell a memory kind of thing, it's like that's the real magic of the movies.
I love
and I was like,
that.
okay, fair enough.
Totally.
So I think there is value in kind of exploring that idea.
But they don't explore it. They just like
Right.
say a sentence and then we move on.
Once
But
again, it's
David-
kind of background.
Are you saying that the statement of the movie is that like, look how bad Hollywood is, good thing we're not like that anymore? Or isn't it saying, as it was before, it is today?
I think sometimes it is.
I don't think it's making a statement either way about.
Yeah, I think
What we're
I
like
think I'm
today.
going a little bit too hard on this. I'm making more of a point than I meant to, because I think you're right. I think it is more of like a sit in this and like we got to re-examine. I think I just was so upset by the description on Netflix that it really set me off. It's like, I'm gonna paraphrase, but it's like Mank is a film about a witty alcoholic writer, and watch him as he re-examines old Hollywood.
Yeah.
And it's like that's like
Not quite.
it's not quite, but the verbiage is similar. It's like watch a writer re-examine old Hollywood, and it's like
Netflix's
I don't know, man.
descriptions
That's bad.
are what do you call that?
Bad?
Known for being somewhat inaccurate.
A lot of the time they're poorly written and they do not make me want to watch a movie.
Yeah. Going back to the idea of movies made about Hollywood, though, I never like it as a premise. Like the idea of a screenwriter sitting down to write about a screenwriter. I'm like, come on, man.
well, we've
Write
had,
what you know.
Hey,
we've had the ultimate screenwriter writing a screenplay, which is adaptation, where it's like it totally dismantles every other one and makes.
I
them
really
seem
wanna
so
cover that
silly.
movie, by the way.
I love adaptation, and it's all about how like silly writers writing about writers are, and it's so meta, and it's so like more elevated
Right. I haven't
than
seen
anything
it.
like this. That it's so much. It's like watching a straight war movie after Inglourious Basterds.
Yeah.
You're just like, it's kind of silly.
To me, it's like that's the only real reason. That's the only valid reason that I would give, for which I would give someone props if they were going to write a screenplay about a screenwriter. If you're gonna do that, make it meta, like
totally.
deconstruct things a little bit. And this thing kind
Well,
of
this
like
movie's a bit meta.
well,
A little
sort
bit, yeah.
of. It's meta in the sense that it kind of like has some dressing on it, like that references script writing. Like instead of just having title cards that say 1934 or something.
Well,
it
at the
says-
beginning of the movie, the producer guy is like, write what you know, and then Mank's like, I never met a writer who said that, or I don't know that writer who said that.
Yeah, and
he-
so there's like references to it, but the central theme of the movie that it explores isn't really about screenwriting itself. It's more about Mank.
Yeah.
It's a personal journey. It doesn't feel like.
And who would have thought that from the title of the movie?
I just think
It's about Mank. This
I
is
hear
so
what
dumb.
you're saying. It's more
biopic.
about a personal journey than it is about an idea. And I think that the movie would have been well served if they put an idea at the center of his journey and then built his story around that. And they put a visual of like, okay, he's achieving this milestone. He's doing this. And like, there is those elements, like
They did do that.
sort of like, okay, will he
No,
write-
I'm not saying that they did these visual milestones and stuff
Yeah,
like that,
yeah.
but it is around a central idea.
Well, what do you think the central
It's
idea
like I
is?
said at the top, it's him going from someone who's just going to write another monster flick to going to becoming someone who's going to write this expose.
Sort of, but like I guess so. I feel like the Mank, like because of the nonlinear storytelling, I feel like the Mank 30 minutes in would have written Citizen Kane, and like he does, like all of a sudden in the middle of the movie he just finishes it, and I don't think that the movie succeeds.
Well,
in tying
the
that,
Mank at the beginning when he's laying in the hospital bed is the one who's going to write
that's
it.
fair.
So
You're right. But I guess my feeling is that the failure is that we don't feel attached to the milestones along the way. You're right.
I agree with you because
yeah.
like which one is the midpoint one? It's probably it's when they're at the party and he's like speaking. First of all, such an awkward party. Like it's a huge room. There's like 30 people in it,
But they're
and
also
there's a guy with piano, but he's not playing it.
Yeah.
And they're all engaged in one conversation. Like Mank's just yelling from 30 feet away his point, and there's another guy a football field away yelling. Okay, this is not how parties work. Parties after 6 people, they mitos.
Yep,
okay,
100%.
And that's why, as an aside, again, 6 people is the most awkward amount of people to have at a party because that is the number of people that always results in all of them sitting in one big group in the living room with the most outspoken and like extroverted one just leading the conversation. Sucks. You need to get 7 or 5
'Cause
people.
then, 4 and 3.
So, and then you break off, and some people are in the kitchen doing their own
That's
thing.
so interesting.
Thanks
It's
for-
like movies. You don't want to have like you don't want to have even numbers. Like you want to have like 5, 7, or 11. That's interesting.
As
Like,
characters in a movie?
yeah, like that's why there's groups like Magnificent Seven, or like Harry Potter's a trio, and then they add in groups of 2, so that it's all like it's almost always 5, 7, 3, 5, 7, or 11 as groups, and like that you can look at movies across.
That's why
history.
Ocean's 8 sucked.
Yeah, and 12
joking.
sucks. 13's good.
Thanks
11's
for
good.
tuning in to James and David's number tips.
Man, I could write a whole book on like how to throw a good party.
Party
Hell yeah.
tips by
I
James.
thought about it a lot.
Yeah.
That party scene also really irritated me because of that logistical error as well. I'm like, this would be lots of different conversations happening, but also the fact that they were talking about the current California politics, and I was completely lost. Like by the end of it, I was kind of like, okay, I sort of get what's going on, but like, what? I shouldn't have to do this much work to understand what the hell is
that
happening.
scene is totally redeemed by Mayer being like, we're not going to turn our back on like 40 million people. We're not going to turn our back on Nazi Germany. That's too big of a market to turn our back on. And I'm like, that hits hard today. Like that's like, I mean, the parallel is China. Like all these businesses aren't going to turn their back on China no matter how despicable a thing they do.
The thing that annoyed me in that scene was there's like a military guy or something there, and he says something like, well, am I allowed to say this? But yeah, I'm going to say this anyway. You know, this stays in the party, and he says whatever he says. But it's like,
says
dude, you're saying that to like 30 people.
Yeah.
You're like, hey,
can't trust that.
no one here signed an NDA or nothing, but I'm just going to yell this to like this giant party.
Yeah.
Insane.
Yeah.
But anyway, we started talking about that scene because I would expect, like I haven't looked, but I would expect that that's probably the midpoint in his arc. That's probably where he like can't go back and where he's on a new course from then on.
Yeah.
But like you said, like
it just doesn't feel clear enough where the milestones are. And like we're pretty attuned to these story beats, and like I just feel like this movie didn't succeed at pacing it out right. Where like we've talked about, there's so many brilliant lines, there's so many brilliant ideas, but the pacing is so so slow and
It's
meandering.
like in every beat, if there was just like one line that was just like, here's a spoonful of pacing.
Totally.
Yeah.
It would they would have expanded the accessibility of this movie to a whole new echelon.
Totally. But I don't even think it's necessarily just an accessibility thing. I think it's just kind of failure to revisit the script in a meaningful way where like a lot of it just
like focus
doesn't hit. Yeah, it's just the focus. And like, it's frustrating because I think there's a world in which I really like this movie. It's just, it needs its focus on like one central idea and then build off of that. It just feels like it's ideas piling on top of each other instead of a central idea that provides a structure that all like the other ribs can now like build on.
Yeah, and I think that's really what we've talked about this before, but these experimental movies where they kind of like they don't want to be like the next movie, right? We're trying something different. We're gonna do a non-linear storyline. We're gonna have like weird characters kind of pop in and not really explain everything and make the audience figure it out. Like I think that there is a place for those films, but
that place is Netflix.
Yes,
100%.
absolutely. But they need to do it so well that the end experience for the viewer is still good. And I think that maybe this is the damage that Netflix is doing, where they just allow. I mean, Netflix specials used to be really good.
Originals, you mean?
Originals.
Well, I think they've changed their tact because the original before it was like, let's just make like huge hits that everybody's going to tune in and watch. And now it seems like they still want those tent poles, but they also want to attract. It's like Microsoft wanting to attract developers or something. They want to attract creators. So they're going to be like, hey, Charlie Kaufman, hey, David Fincher, come here and have a complete creative control, make whatever you want.
Yeah, and I mean, that's cool, I guess. Like I like that exists, but I like that exists as sort of a creative person and an appreciator of the arts. But as a consumer and a viewer, it annoys me because I used to be able to know that a Netflix original was going to be pretty good. And now it's a complete crapshoot.
I think though that went away a long time ago. Where
it did.
And like
it's been a while.
They're a huge studio and they're producing so much content. And I think it's like every other movie where you have to read the reviews, you have to know and like do a bit of research and be like, okay, is this a subject matter that I care about? Is this something that I want to watch? And like you can't just default to watching everything that's in the top 10 of Netflix.
But this is the funny thing is that I completely agree with that, and that you have to be, there's a responsibility on you to kind of like pick the things that you think you're gonna like or whatever. But like David Fincher makes really good movies. Charlie Kaufman is kind of hit or miss, but like he's made a lot of really good movies.
Yeah.
And so like this is the second movie we've done now that is a Netflix original that we only did because it is
a new movie.
On the strength of their names.
On the strength of the director's
and what they've
names.
done in the past.
That's
and like, is this going to keep happening? Are we going to keep doing these movies? Because like, it's a new David Fincher movie. It's a new Charlie Kaufman
For context for
movie.
the audience, we had planned on covering I've Been Thinking of Ending Things because we thought Charlie Kaufman was so sick.
We didn't actually end up doing that.
No,
one.
we watched it and we were like, we
What
cannot
are we
make an
gonna talk
episode about
about?
this. And I actually had similar
interesting.
feelings about this movie too. Last night after I watched it, I was like, do I have anything to say?
There was a moment.
That's
There was a moment where I was like, "Are we gonna pull a Charlie like a Thinking of Ending
Yeah.
Things?"
But I'm really of two minds about it because by the same token, I'm really glad that these movies exist, and I'm actually, in the case of Mank at least, I'm glad it exists the way it exists. I actually don't really want it to be changed. Yeah, I would have, me and millions of other people would have liked it more if it was more commercial or something like that. But I'm not convinced that that's the best thing for this movie. I like how it is, and if I was just a different audience member, I would love it. And so if they watered it down to make it more accessible for all the dumb people like me,
see, but
they may have made it less good.
I disagree that it's you didn't like it because you didn't get it.
Yeah.
You didn't like it because it wasn't that good.
You
and
cannot-
it's good.
yeah.
It's an excellent portal into this world. And if that's what matters to you, you want to sit in the 30s and 40s, then it's awesome. It does such an incredible job of bringing it to life. But as we've talked about, like narratively, it fails. It fails to do like keystone things of script writing that are like the absolute building blocks of a good movie, and it fails to do those. And like movies can exist outside of this, but this movie isn't doing enough outside of that in its storytelling to work.
Yeah.
And I think that like it's not that you didn't get it. It's not that like you missed so much that it's not a good movie. It's that the movie doesn't have
And
that.
that's
All
what
right,
I'm talking
you
about.
convinced me. That makes me feel better about myself,
Yeah.
so I'm on your side now.
I'm not asking anyone to water down these movies and make them dumber, because you can have a movie where you don't understand everything, every reference or whatever, and it still be a really fun, enjoyable, moving experience for you to go on, right? These are like, we've talked before about how Martin Scorsese made those disparaging remarks about the MCU movies or whatever, where they're like less like films and more like, amusement park rides. But every movie sort of is an amusement park ride. And I think if the filmmaker stops treating it that way and starts treating it like this is an inaccessible thing that you have to work for to understand, it's like, well, what's the point then?
And I think let's not compare it to the MCU, because I think people will be like, you fucking idiots. Let's compare it to The Godfather. Let's compare it to The Godfather 2, where like there's a lot of elements. It's bringing a world to life. It's doing all these things, but there's a character at the center of it that has a central idea, that has a clear quest, and everything is moving through that and building off of that. And it makes the movie feel like it's moving. It's got a point. It's got energy, and like that makes a good movie. And The Godfather 2 isn't less complex than this. Sure, it requires less knowledge going in, but what Mank utterly fails to do is to have that structure.
I wouldn't say utterly fails, but it fails, because there is a progression. It's just like very slight, and you don't feel it very much. Like when you look at the beginning and you look at the end, you're kind of like, okay, we were kind of taken on this journey, and there is structure of, in 1940 he broke his leg, and that's the timeline, that's the present day, and then we're doing flashbacks that kind of like progress as the story progresses, but. So there is progression, but I would say it failed ultimately to really create a compelling version of that, because I was bored as hell.
Were any of you confused at the, I think it's in the first flashback. So, no, it's like the second one. So he has like a flashback of when he broke his leg.
Yep.
And then he has like the actual flashback where he goes and he meets Davies. So in the beginning of that flashback, he's like, he's meeting... I think the guy's name is Charlie, and he's gonna go on a train to his auntie's house, and he's like drunk. Then he passes out onto like a cart of luggage, and then Charlie pushes him into the train. And then I guess time elapses, and the next shot we see is just a bedroom and Mank on a bed waking up. Yep. And I was like, are we in the present, or is this still the flashback?
I was definitely,
because it kind of looked like the same room that his wife laid him down in, but it isn't. And so Mank wakes up and he's not with Charlie anymore, and then he walks outside, and that's when he meets Davies.
I don't even know where that was.
I guess that's just like inside the studio. Like
I was just so confused. Yeah, and they were like, "What's Mank doing here?" I'm like, "Was he not supposed to be there?"
Mank doesn't know. He says, "I don't know where I am." Like we don't know either, buddy.
Maybe that's the point. Is that it's supposed to be kind of disorienting? But I think I would have preferred, because the movie set this pattern of like, okay, when you're jumping through time, we're gonna write it on screen. There's other ways they could have done it, like have like a visual cue, have a thing, and like they do, like,
or just don't have another bed on the left side of the frame again, and the door on the right. Exactly. Just any other shot would have been way more clear.
Yeah, I don't think they were trying to be purposely disorienting, but I 100% agree it was a little bit confusing.
Another thing that bothered me.
Here, preach.
Well, it's less like a movie thing and more just kind of like a characterization thing.
Louder for the people in the back.
His wife. She's like the best person in the world.
Yeah, she's
Jesus.
He doesn't deserve her.
Yeah, what the hell? Like,
poor Sarah.
This is ridiculous.
Yeah, poor Sarah.
I know, and he calls her poor Sarah.
Why? What a dick.
Like, she puts up with all of his shit, and she's just like the best to him.
And I mean,
come on.
Gender relations in the 30s and 40s were very different, unfortunately. And I don't know what the power dynamic was like.
I think women could leave, especially in California, like especially in a more liberal area like that. Like they'd leave. She could leave. I don't know.
Yeah, what does she say? Like, why? He's like, why do you stay with me?
Yeah, he asks her so many times throughout the movie, why do you love me? Why do you stay with me?
She's like, I've already invested this much time and energy, for fuck's sake.
And then at the end, and that was kind of a cool speech, I guess, at the end, where she's like, now you owe me something, sort of. But at the same time, I was like, man, you're the most loyal to a fault, literally. I was like, get out of there, you know?
I like her as an actor. I didn't know. I was like, she's so familiar. What is she from?
Yeah.
And then I realized.
Did you watch Sense8?
I did watch Sense8.
She was in Sense8.
Yeah, she's blonde in that one.
She's the Icelandic girl.
And I also had just watched Precursor, which is the Brandon Cronenberg one.
Oh, I haven't watched that yet.
Yeah, she's in that too.
She has a really different look in this one, though. Yeah. I was like, oh man, it was like she's from something. I just don't know what.
I think that overall, this movie has so much good for it that if this topic does interest you, I think it's well worth a watch. And you'll know pretty quick if you're not into it, and you can just turn it off. It's free. It's on your Netflix.
I think that if you are a David, it's worth a watch. But I think I don't even necessarily disagree with you. Yeah. Like maybe it's worth a watch for some people. Okay. For other people,
let's set the
stay qualifier. The hell away.
Have you seeked out Citizen Kane because you care about film knowledge? Yes, then watch Mank.
Have you watched Citizen Kane just because you want to be able to say you've watched Citizen Kane? maybe don't watch Mank. The thing is, you will know in 5 minutes.
Yeah.
What
You will know
other
immediately.
reason is there to watch Citizen Kane than to educate yourself?
To see what it's all about, because everyone says it's the best. If
Yeah,
you watched
educate
it and
yourself. Yeah, same thing.
if you watched Citizen Kane and you legitimately were like, I see the hype, this probably is still one of the best movies of all time. This is amazing. Then you'll probably like Mank. But if you watch it and you're like, I could see I guess it was okay.
What did you think? Did you think it was one of the best movies of all time?
It was very good, but I mean, it's very old.
Yeah.
So you can.
Did it make you feel things?
Sure.
It's very interesting, and it's
'Cause
very
I-
dated, and a lot of the things that it does are absolutely revolutionary, but have since been replicated or built upon
In cartoons.
Yeah.
Like in The Simpsons.
Yeah,
Like,
exactly. And so it's certainly
tough.
it requires you to go in accepting that, but it's very interesting, and it does a lot of things really right, and it's still edgy in like a really cool way that still holds up sharp 80
Yeah.
years later.
Here's what I'll say. If you want to do homework and you're like interested in old 1930s Hollywood dynamics, watch the movie. If not, watch something else.
If you want to watch an old movie that's
waste of time.
way more entertaining, just watch Casablanca.
and if you're really just into Fincher, then this is not going to be like Zodiac or Seven.
Definitely
or,
not.
Or Mindhunter.
I hated this movie. It wasn't like Zodiac at all.
I want to cover Zodiac, though. That movie's sick.
I'd be down. I love David Fincher. I think overall
Yeah.
he's one of the best working directors these
He's
days.
great.
He did a good thing here.
Yeah.
It just wasn't for me.
Yeah.
pulled
Not
a-
right now.
He pulled a Charlie Kaufman.
But I kind of, okay, I just actually want to go back a little bit to how Netflix is allowing people to do what they want to do. And I think before what you guys were saying, I was, and I still am to a certain degree, very excited that Netflix is giving carte blanche to all these people. But I think that the best movies are created from the tension between the creative and the business, where some energy from the tension between them creates something that is better than either could do separate.
Yes.
And that's what makes like the absolute magic movies. Like it creates the One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. It creates the Kubrick movies where it's Kubrick and it's all this like crazy energy, but it's being pulled in other directions. And like there's something there that Kubrick can't create on his own.
Yeah.
And I think by Netflix giving these people zero tension, you lose a little bit of that push
Well,
and
Star
pull.
Wars is the quintessential example.
That's what I
100%.
was going to say.
The trilogy, right? The
Yeah.
prequel trilogy.
The original trilogy, George Lucas had handlers.
Yep.
Like he came up with a raw creative, well, even his raw creative thing was based on something else, but he came up with that base, and then he had, producers and directors and writers kind of being like, here's how we kind of mold this into something that's
Yeah.
even better. And because that was so successful, they were like, let's give him complete free reign for the prequels, and they sucked.
Wah, wah.
So it's like Netflix
Yeah.
is just doing the Star Wars prequels,
Yeah.
but for
But
every
here's
director.
the thing. It's different too, though. You know that theory, the medium is the message. Marshall McLuhan.
Sure.
Canadian. Do you know what that means?
I've
though?
heard that before,
So
yeah.
the idea here is that like the piece of content is never completely without constraint, because the way that you consume that content, Netflix in this example, it determines what that content is. So, for example, a tweet that back when Twitter was 140 characters, a joke that I tweet out is going to be a certain kind of joke by virtue of having to be short.
Right.
And so the movies, when it was, you're going to make a movie, we're going to produce this movie, and the way that we measure the success of that movie is how many bums you can put into seats in my theater. That's the medium.
Yeah.
The theater being full. That is no longer the medium.
That's true.
The message changes, because
That's
now
fair.
all I need for you to do is subscribe to Netflix.
Yep.
And I get your $12.
And you're right. For the whatever 100,000 people that are absolutely in love with Mank, they're gonna just keep subscribing to Netflix because they want more of that.
Because it's
so.
the long tail.
Totally.
This is another thing. If you don't know what long tail really means, it's a graph where in the past we used to like have shelf space, right? Where you go into Walmart and there's a number of CDs that they can stock, and the majority of people are going to buy Taylor Swift. So that's like the first point on the graph. It's like a lot of people buying this one thing. But now that graph slopes down and goes to an asymptotal, like never approaching zero but never getting there kind of thing, where it's like, there's this like vampire opera metal music from Japan that only like one guy is buying, but it's
Yeah.
okay because shelf space is infinite now.
Yeah.
Right.
So as long as some
are-
people are watching this, that it justifies the cost of them making
That's
it, then
true. And like,
give me the $12.
like you said, I'm glad that this movie exists, and I'm glad that the people that love it do love it, because like I want them to make this kind of movie about something I really care about. Like,
Do you?
like
Yeah.
Rainbow Six Siege or something.
I don't know, I can't think of what it is, but like.
I mean,
like 90s video game making, like make the like Blood, Sweat, and Tears, or like
I don't
whatever the
know.
console wars, but like make it really about like living in that era and like going to arcades and shit. Like,
I disagree. I think that any movie that is this inaccessible to a general viewer, it doesn't have any business existing.
But I think that
Well, you're talking about like indie movies should just stay indie. I don't want them on my Netflix homepage.
No, because indie movies are, they have something to say, and they can be a very, very watchable adventure to go on.
But I think
I'm not saying that filmmakers shouldn't take risks. I'm not saying that movies shouldn't be different. I'm saying that in the being different, you need to create something that is watchable in the same way that music is not worth being made if it's not good to listen to. Like I talked about this, I think, in a previous podcast where like I know people who have gone to music school, and because every song has been made under the sun already, I need to make something new, and the end result is completely stupid to listen. It's not fun to listen to. So it's like, what's the point of making music if it's not pleasing in some way?
But it's not about that. Those are two separate things. Having something be so experimental that it's not pleasing, it's just edgy or it's just interesting, is different than having something that's a narrow audience. Because like, I think there's an appeal to having something that appeals to something narrower. Like, you can't, like, I mean, you can, but it's a little, like, if you're like, my absolute favorite movie is the most popular movie in history, people will be like, don't you have some kind of individuality? Don't you have this thing? And so these things that have narrow audiences, for people that do cherish that, I think there's a special appeal to that it is theirs. It's
Totally.
It's the less big audience. It's not for everyone. It's for me.
Yeah,
Are you saying they're gonna make a sequel to Kung Pao?
Hell yeah, that's
the
for
fist.
you.
Chosen!
David, I don't disagree. I think that narrow audiences are good, and I think that things that are about specific interests should be made. But I think that on some level they have to work optimally. And I'm not, okay, maybe I'm using the wrong language. I'm saying they have to do this and they have to do this.
But optimally.
I think optimally, like, a better movie is one that is really, 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 really appreciated by this narrow audience, sort of appreciated by a broader audience, and like, it's pretty good movie.
So you're saying Netflix should pay these filmmakers based on views or watch time? Because if it's just like, here's flat rate, make whatever you want, then there's no incentive for them to make it commercial at all or accessible at all.
I think that's a bottom-up way you could do it, but maybe a top-down way that you could do it is to have some sort of creative oversight and sort of the producers to George Lucas's creative raw vision.
I guess though,
like you could incentivize the filmmakers themselves to make a better movie, or you could also just kind of control it and force them to make a better movie.
Yeah, I like the bottom up way.
So I agree with you where the optimal is that you have both. You have like the people that really care about this idea and like they understand the whole circle of it, and you have the narrative that pushes it and it elevates it into something special. But if you can only have one, if it's about something you care about, like, I mean, ideally you don't have to choose.
You know what's so sick is that this very theme is covered in this movie. When Orson Welles says, like, I have final cut, I have final everything.
true.
I have total control over this. There's no notes coming from the studio on this. Yeah. Wow, and this is what we got. Wow.
Come for a circle.
Well,
So what are we doing next week?
we're coming full circle on the Dark Knight trilogy. We are going to be rounding out our coverage of the Christopher Nolan Batman movies with The Dark Knight Rises.
Yay!
That'll be done, and then after that, we're going to do Two Towers.
Yeah.
Getting right into the middle of our coverage of Lord of the Rings.
Ooh, buddy.
So join the convo, watch those movies ahead of time, so you can follow along. You
in
know?
the convoy.
Did I say convo or
You said
convoy?
convo.
The
but
convoy
it's-
combo.
It's kind of the same thing.
They're the same thing.
Ooh.
In case you don't know, the convoy is our
That's our
close-
tribe.
Yeah, it's our tribe. You guys are our friends.
We have a hand signal now. Convoy! Convoy! It's a C. The convoy! Just making this up on the spot. You guys can talk to us if you follow us on Twitter at Carpool Critics, or you can email us hello@carpoolcritics.ca. Hello!
I want to say hello to you.
It's probably going to be me, though.
Yeah, probably James.
I answer a lot of emails these days.
I answer some. If you address me directly, I might respond.
I move those ones to unread, so you see
Oh,
them.
what? Really?
Sometimes.
Sorry, guys. I'll answer your emails.
All right, Batman and Lord of the Rings. Wow, we're people pleasers.
Wait, so what are we doing next week?
Batman.
Dark Knight. Rises.
going up.
Returns. It's going up.
in the dark. Molded by it.
I love you.
See you later.